Hey guys, welcome back to my channel for another video on query solution, and in today's session we are going to understand the concept of control and coordination. So as you guys know that when we are talking about this chapter, we have to understand this chapter in entire detail based on two different types of organisms. One, we have to study the descriptions with respect to animal, and in the second case we have to study the detailings with respect to plants. And in today's session we are going to understand the concept of control and coordination with regards to plants. Animal video is also uploaded so that you can check out that video as well for understanding the details with regards to control and coordination in animals. Alright. So to further first of all go into the details of this chapter, and even before showing you the subtopics that I am going to cover today, I first of all would want you to understand the meaning of the important keyword which means control and coordination over here. Alright. So just pay attention to understand what do we mean by saying control and coordination. And this is general meaning. This is not with regards to plant, but this is a general meaning of control and coordination is what we are trying to understand. Okay. Now, since we are talking about an organism's body and we are saying something that is controlled. So, what are we trying to control first of all? We are trying to control the actions that one organism is performing. Because we do know that any action that we are performing, we should be mindful in performing, right? Then only we say the action, some actions as good actions, right? Like for example, if I'm teaching you people, I'm not just teaching something which is irrelevant, right? I'm not teaching you something like, for example, maybe something in Hindi or some literature mainly, right? I'm teaching you something which is regarding to a concept and important right now to understand. So when we are saying the meaning of the term control, what do we mean? We mean that by utilizing the different sense organs, we are trying to perform an action, right? What do we mean by saying control? By saying control, we mean that we are trying to utilize the different sense organs that we have in our body and trying to perform an action. But what type of action again? An action in not just irrelevant manner, but in a systematic manner. We are trying to perform an action in a systematic manner. This is very important. We are not doing action just irrelevantly, but we are trying to perform the action in a systematic manner. Now we do know there is not just one sense organ we have in our body, right? We have got 5 different types of sense organs in our body. So whenever we are trying to perform an action by utilizing or by taking the help of sense organ to perform an action, we do know that we would require the coordination of different organs, right? Because there are various organs in our body, so we would definitely require the coordination of different organs to happen, or coordination of different tissues in our body to happen, so that we can perform an action in a systematic manner. And this entirely what define control and coordination as. So in exam, now if you are asked a question, what do you mean by saying the important key line or keywords control and coordination? How are you going to define this important definition as? So how can you define it? So control and coordination means working together of various organs or tissues of a body to complete or to perform, anything you can use, to complete an action in a systematic manner. So this is a proper definition, even you can note down so that you are able to write the definition in case if it comes in exam. So the working together of different organs in the body so that an action can be completed in a systematic manner. This is how we are going to define control and coordination as. Now see, as I said you, in today's detail we are talking about plants, right? So they don't have those sense organs that we have. Definitely they don't have sense organs. They don't have muscular system. They don't have nervous system, right? The one developed that we have is not basically the plant body also has. But they do show some different types of coordinated activities. So yes, it is very important to note that even though plant does not have nervous system, plant does not have sense organs and all these important systems basically, but still plant shows different types of movements, plant shows different types of actions, and in their body also it shows a coordinated action basically. So what is important to note here, that even plants are stationary in nature. They don't move from one place to another. Even there are some trees you would see like they would age around 300 or 400 or maybe more years ago, but still they are at the same place. They would have grown, they would have developed, but they are not moving from one place to another, right? So plants are definitely stationary in nature, but even being stationary, plant exhibit some sort of movement. So this is something I'm writing with a different pen because it's very important to note that plant exhibit different sorts of movement. Plant exhibit different types of movement. Now what does this mean then? One way we are saying plants are stationary, but at the other way we are saying that plants show movement. What does that mean? So here movement does not mean plant is going from one place to another. No, plant is going to remain in that same place. But even being stationary in nature, plant do show different types of movement. And this is the entire concept, children, that we have to understand what are the different types of movement the plant body is going to show to us. And that's the same thing we are going to learn in Justify. But before studying about these movements, it is very important that we are clear with two important keywords. One is a stimulus and another is a response. In case if you guys are clear with these two keywords, well and good, then you can very well understand the concepts of movement in the plant. But in case if you guys are not clear regarding what are these stimulus and response keyword over here, then just pay attention because that's the exact thing I'm going to tell you right now. What is a stimulus? First of all, let us understand this. So stimulus is basically an environmental trigger. What is a stimulus? Stimulus is an environmental trigger that initiates a reaction or that initiates a response. So because of an environmental trigger, or because what are these environmental triggers is we are going to understand, but how will you define a stimulus as? So because of certain environmental trigger, when a plant show us a response, when plant gives a response, when plant initiates a response, then that is something which we say as a stimulus. Then how can we define what is response in that case then? So response is basically a reaction which is given to a stimulus, right? So as you can see, these two keywords, the definitions and the keywords, we are using both the keywords together. In stimulus we are using response, and response we are using stimulus, because both go hand in hand. Without a stimulus there can be no response. We say, right, we need two hands to clap. So it's the exact same thing. Without stimulus there would be no response at all, and if there is a stimulus, then definitely plant is going to show some sort of response or some sort of movement, and that is the exact same detail. Now we are going to understand that what are the different types of movement, what are the different types of stimulus that plants show their responses towards. So let us see that part now. So in today's session, we are going to understand about these two important topics all in detail. We are going to understand what are the different types of tropic movement that plants show, and we are also going to understand what are the different types of nastic movement that plants show, and what are the meaning and differences between these two movements also. Alright, so as we discussed just now, that plants are definitely going to show to us some sorts of movement. And as we discussed the two important keywords, that these movements would be triggered because of some stimulus, and because of these stimulus, plant is going to show some sorts of response to us, right? And this response is something that we are also trying to understand in terms of movement. So just to simplify you, if plant will face some environmental trigger, which we are saying as stimulus, so to respond to that stimulus, the plant is going to show us some sorts of movement. So what are these different environmental factors or environmental triggers in the plant, because of which plant has to show some types of responses or movement? That is what we are going to see. So the first important stimulus the plant show a response towards is something which is known as light. And what light here are we talking about? So definitely we are not talking about the tube lights and different lights that we have, but plant respond to a very important light, which is the sunlight. We all know that plant do require sunlight mainly. So sunlight is the first important stimulus. The second important stimulus the plant would show any response towards is something which is known as water. That is a second important environmental factor. The third important environmental factor that plant show a response towards is because of gravity. The fourth important factor or a trigger that we have to learn is something which we say as basically the touch. And finally, the fifth important trigger, which is a chemical. So we have to understand the different types of movement in plant with regards to these different types of stimulus, or to simplify based on NCERT, we have to understand the 5 different types of stimulus because of which the plant is going to show us different types of movement. The movement can be tropic or nastic, we are understanding that in just a while, but these are the 5 stimulus because of which the plant has to show some sorts of movement. It could be light, it could be water, it could be gravity, it could be touch, and it could be chemical. Now, since we are talking about movement, children, there are 2 types of movement the plant body can show, and please be very clear now and pay attention to whatever I am teaching, because else you will be end up with getting confused. So just pay attention. Plant will show us movement which are of 2 types. What are the 2 types of movement? Plant can show us some movement which are growth dependent. What do we mean by saying growth dependent? Means there could be some growth that is going to happen because of a movement that has happened, right? Plant could maybe increase in size, or some parts of the plant could grow and increase in size. So that is the meaning of saying the word here, growth dependent. So what could be another type of movement? So just the opposite of it means what? Some of the movement in the plant that we can see could be growth independent. What do we mean by saying it? That here in such cases there would not be any growth. Plant could still show a movement, they would still move maybe, but they would not undergo any sorts of changes. There would be no growth involved in this process. So one thing is very clear, if a plant is showing us movement because of a stimulus, either the movement can be growth dependent or opposite to it can be growth independent, right? We are clear till here. There is another second important thing the plant would consider before showing movement. What is that? That either if the growth is happening, the growth could be directional. Means there could be some direction of the growth that can happen. And just the opposite is here what is going to happen. Here the growth, since there is no growth involved, and here they also are, we say the response or the movement basically which will happen will be directionless. There will be no specific way, there will be no specific direction to which this movement is going to be seen. Alright. So just to say you clearly, because many children gets confused here itself. And here it's the base when we are defining tropic and nastic movement. So please pay attention. Plant is going to show us some sorts of movement or some sorts of responses with regards to the stimulus, and these are the 5 stimulus based on NCERT we have to understand, right? As we already stated the 5 different types. Now, whenever the plant is going to get any of this 5 trigger, the plant is going to show us a movement basically. Some movement the plant can show can be growth dependent, means there can be some growth that can happen in the plant, and such movement or growth, if it is happening, it can be directional. Directional to whom we'll understand later, but it could be directional. And just the opposite is what can happen in case number 2. The growth which is, or the movement which is happening can be growth independent. There is no growth involved basically in the plant, and also the movement becomes directionless. There could be no direction involved in this case. Okay, so these are the 2 different types of movement. And just to tell you children, these 2 subcategories that we have understood makes the movement as tropic movement and nastic movement. So what are these 2 now? I think many of you can now understand it clearly. Plant shows 2 different types of movement with regards to stimulus. Either they can show us tropic movement. These tropic movements are also known as tropism. The process is known as tropism, or they can show us nastic movement, or the process is known as nastism. So just be clear with each keyword, because anyway the question can be asked. So how do you define a tropic movement as? So tropic movements means what? How can you define a tropic movement? The movement that occurs, the movement that is growth dependent. That is the first thing that we have understood, right? The movement which is growth dependent, and the response is either in the direction of stimulus. The response is either in the direction of stimulus, or the response can be away from the stimulus also. So the response can be away from the stimulus is something we say as a tropic movement. So you can note down this definition if you want to. A very possible question: define tropism. So how would you define tropism? We have defined tropism based on these two things that we have understood just now. Tropism or tropic movement are those movement, first of all, which are going to involve growth. And since in these movement plants are showing growth to us, these growth, because of a stimulus, these movement are happening. Either the growth can happen towards the direction of stimulus, means from where the stimulus is coming, the growth is also happening at that stage only, or either the growth will be away from the direction of stimulus, means if here the stimulus is, the growth is happening in the opposite direction. So these two types of movement is what is the tropic movement. First of all, they are involving growth into them, and since we are saying the growth is directional, means what? Either the directional will be, if stimulus is in this direction happening, the growth will also be in the same direction, or if the stimulus is in this direction, the growth is going to be in the opposite direction. And because since there are two types of growth, the directions of the growth that can happen in case of tropic plant, it is again very important for us to understand that these tropic movement or tropism in plant can be either positive tropism, or they can be also negative tropism. So what are these two? Let us see. The same thing we have seen here. Positive tropism means what? Here the growth is happening, the growth is occurring towards the stimulus. So whatever the direction of stimulus is, in the same direction the growth is also happening. So growth is occurring towards the stimulus is something we say as positive tropism. And what could be negative? Negative means here the growth is occurring. What do you think? How will define this as? So the growth is occurring away from the stimulus, means in the opposite direction to the stimulus. All right. So be clear with these important things that we have discussed. Now if you are clear here, then whatever things next we are going to understand, you would be clear everywhere, right? So tropic movement is what? If this is the plant mainly, right? And if this is some stimulus, maybe consider this is sunlight. Okay, just consider this. So if a plant is growing in the direction of the sunlight, for example, what are we going to say that movement as? So we are going to say that movement as positive tropism. But if sunlight is coming from here and the plant is going in the opposite direction, then that is something which we are saying as the negative tropism. So I hope I have made you clear till here. All right. Now, since we are considering all these 5 different types of stimulus, we have to understand all these 5 different types of positive and negative tropism also. And it's very simple. I'll explain you very easily and you guys will easily understand also. But I hope you are clear till here. Just tell me one thing. Are we also going to see positive or negative tropism in the case of nastic movement? Do you think so? Are we going to see some positive nastism or negative nastism also over here? Do you guys think so? So the answer is no. And I'm not going to answer you that right now, but I want you guys to comment me in the comment section box that why there would be no positive nastism or negative nastism that we are going to see in case of nastic movement. The answer is a no, sure shot, that we are not going to see these movements here. But the reason is something that you guys are going to tell me in the comment section box. I'm not going to explain you that, but I've given already a hint. I've explained everything in detail. If you're clear here, you would be able to give me this answer also. So now let us try to study the different types of tropic movements in detail. Alright, so let us understand every detail now with regards to the tropic movement of plant. So as we discussed, there are 5 different types of stimulus and there are 5 different types of tropic movement that we have to study, right? So the first stimulus that a plant will show a response towards was sunlight, right? That was the first stimulus that we have seen. So the tropic movement that plants show either in response towards the sunlight or maybe away from the sunlight is something that we say as phototropism. So be clear with the keyword. Photo means what here? What is the trigger here? So the trigger is the sunlight, and tropism, as we already discussed, a growth dependent movement. So how are we going to define phototropism as? So phototropism is a movement we can define as the type of tropic movement in plant, the tropic movement that occur either towards or away from. What is the source here? So it occurs either towards or away from the sunlight. That is something that we can say as a phototropism is. The movement of plant, the tropic movement of plant that can occur either towards the sunlight or away from the sunlight. So what are the parts of the plant that will show movement either towards or away? So this is an activity, children, that I have designed for you all, which is also given in NCERT, and you get a question many times in exam also. So just to tell you, this entire activity is not I'm going to explain you in detail in this video right now. There are activities related to photo, geo and hydro, 3 types of tropism, which I'm going to make a video on it separately. But today I'm only going to explain you what is phototropism all about. Okay, so this activity description I'm not talking today in detail, but do check out the video in which I'm going to explain you all these details about the activities also. Because as I said, in exam you get a question sometime that design an activity to show phototropism. So this is the activity that you can write. Okay, so check out that, but not today. All right. So in this photo that you can see on the top part, what is this basically? So we have used 2 potted plants, right? As you can see, we have put them in some box jars where there is only one source of light that is coming. So what are you able to see over here? In the case A that we see, the source of light is only coming from the top part, right? And in case B, what is happening? The source of light is coming from side angle. And what is the inference, if you can see? Just leave all these here. Don't keep on reading and getting distracted. But what is the case if you see over here? What is the type of growth which is happening? First of all, let me tell you, the plant is growing. Okay, so that's why we are saying as growth dependent. The plant is 100% showing growth. But is there any difference over here and here that you can notice? So I hope many of you can think, in case 1, the plant is growing upright, right? There is no different types of movement that we see. But in case number 2, the plant is showing a growth because it is bending towards one side. And is there any reason why it is bending? So it is bending because the availability of light is coming from a direction which is also in one particular direction only. And that was the reason, if you remember, I said you tropic movement are directional movement. Wherever the source of light will be, there the growth is going to happen. Then definitely there would be some part where even light would not matter, but some part of the plant the light would matter. So can you tell me, in this case, which part of the plant is responding towards sunlight? Which part is growing towards light here over here? So as you can see, the shoot portion of the plant, right? The shoot is something which is growing towards light, and that's what happened in nature also. Whenever the plant get their solar energy, in whichever direction they are going to get the energy, the solar energy mainly, they bend towards that particular direction only. The reason is here, but not talking about it today. And which part of the plant do you think is irrespective here? The growth will happen, but irrespective of the sunlight. So basically the roots which are inside, the roots are growing irrespectively of light. They are growing, but irrespective of the light. But shoots are getting dependent towards light, and that's why they are bending towards light and growing. So this is what is phototropism. What is phototropism? The movement that occur either towards or away from the stimulus. So can you tell me now which part of the plant is showing you positive tropism? So positive tropism is being shown by the shoots of the plant, right? That's what we seen. Shoots bend towards the source of light. And which part of the plant is going to show us negative tropism? So as we discussed, the roots would show the growth, but it would be independent of the direction of light. So this is just one type of tropism that we have covered, which is phototropism. The second type of tropic movement that we need to understand is your water, which is your stimulus. And when we talk about water, the type of tropic movement is known as hydrotropism. Hydro means water. Tropism again means the same thing. So can you define the hydrotropic movement for me? I think you can just use and interchange some keywords and define it entirely. What is a hydrotropic movement? So a tropic movement that occurs either towards or away from what? Away from sunlight? No, that's phototropism. So it occurs either towards or away from water. That is something which we say as hydrotropism. So here the trigger is your water. Now some part of the plant is going to show us positive hydrotropism, and some part of the plant is going to show us negative hydrotropism also. So let us see what are the different parts and what is the activity related to it. Okay. So this is the activity, as you can see over here, is demonstrating to us the concept of hydrotropism. As I said, again, not explaining the detail, but just look at the diagram over here. There are two potted plants that we have placed. In one of the plant, we have kept the soil moist, means we have watered the plant mainly, but in another plant that we have used, we have kept the soil dry. So plant is basically searching for water, because we do know plant do require water, right? Now, since we have kept the soil dry and we do know that plant would require water, what have we done as a change? We have kept a porous type of a pot. Porous means something which has got holes. So some quantity of water can ooze out of the pot basically. So such porous pot we have kept inside this potted plant. Now what is going to happen if we leave this thing for few days? What are we going to see? The change that we are going to see is that the shoots would grow irrespectively, because shoots are not directly dealing with water, we do know. But roots are the structures that do require, and they are directly in contact with this environmental trigger, that's water. So what is going to happen? As this porous spot, the roots of the plant will start searching for water, and they will start growing towards the source of the water where they are finding this environmental trigger. So what does this say first of all to us? That plant definitely show response towards water. But then which part of the plant is showing you positive tropism? So as we just now have seen, the roots of the plants which are there, they are going to show us positive tropism. And which part of the plant has shown us negative? So the shoot. Negative means what? As we said, negative does not mean growth is not happening. Growth is happening, but it is not happening towards the direction of stimulus. It is happening away from the direction of stimulus. Where water was needed directly was the root, but irrespective, shoots are also growing. Shoot are not caring about water mainly. So that's the negative tropism part of the shoot. Alright. The third type of trigger, as we stated, we have to understand is because of the gravity. Right. So what do you think? What name will we give this type of tropic movement as? So this is something we say as geotropism. So again, I hope you guys could help me in defining it, right? So how do you define geotropism as? So it is a type of tropic movement that occurs entirely. We are repeating, just remember this much, you have to only change the keyword here. So the tropic movement that occurs either towards or away from what? From the source. And here what is the source? The source is your gravity. And again, in case of geotropism, we are going to see a part which is showing us positive tropism and a part that is going to show us the negative tropism also. So let us see through an activity again, that activity related to geotropism. Alright, so this is the activity that you can see over here is related to geotropism that I have made for you guys. Okay, so I hope many of you can already relate by seeing, not a much complicated activity. We are again taking two potted plant. One plant is what we have kept it upright, and another plant we have kept it horizontally for few days. So what is going to happen if we keep it horizontally? After few days, what is the change we are going to see? That the shoot will start growing towards the upward direction. And we do know where is the gravity? The gravity is towards the downward direction. And which part of the plant will grow towards the gravity? So again, the roots of the plant. So which part is going to show us positive tropism because of gravity? The roots. And which part is going to show us the negative tropism because of gravity? So the shoots of the plant. So this is an activity demonstrating us the activity of geotropism. So as we stated, let us quickly mention which part is going to show us positive tropism, so the roots of the plant, and which part is going to show us the negative tropism, so the shoots of the plant. Alright, so here till here we have covered three different types of stimulus and three different type of positive negative tropic activities, considering sunlight, considering water, and considering gravity. The next important stimulus that we have to understand is your touch. Right, now what would you say this tropic movement as? Touch tropism? So no, the answer is not that, but it is something which is known as THIGMOTROPISM. All right, so how would you define THIGMOTROPISM quickly? So it is a type of tropic movement that occurs because of what? So it is occurring because of a stimulus which is touch. And let me quickly write down the last activity which is because of chemical also. So here we say this type of tropic movement as chemotropism. And how would we define chemotropism as? So this is a type of tropic movement that occurs because of what trigger? So that occurs because of chemicals, because of certain chemicals. Okay, so let us see quickly what are thigmo and chemotropism description. So you guys would be thinking, why am I not teaching you positive and negative tropism in these two cases? So let me tell you, based on NCERT, you don't need to learn so much into descriptions. You have to study about the positive and negative tropism effect with regards to these three environmental factors only, which were sunlight, water, and gravity. With regards to touch and chemical, these different descriptions is what you don't need to know. So just remember, thigmotropism is a growth dependent movement which could occur because of touch, and chemotropism is a growth dependent movement which could occur because of chemicals. So let us see through the activity or through diagram mainly what are these tropic movements mainly. So as you can see here, this upper part is showing us thigmotropism and the lower part is showing us the chemotropism. Alright, so thigmo means what? Touch. Now, how can a plant grow because of touch? So think about those plants that require some support to grow. And I think you can recall climbers, right? Climbers definitely require the support to grow. We generally, you would have seen some plants where they have tied ropes and there's some portion of the plant just starts coiling, taking the support of the rope, right? And that's the same example I have drawn here. Here is a plant which is growing and it has taken this extensive coiling because of the support that has happened. Now, just one important thing based on NCRT, what you need to know, children, is that touch is inducing growth over here. Yes, the coiled area is something which we are saying as the tendrils of the climbers, right? This coiled area. But the important thing to note here is the part of the plant which is actually touching the support will grow slowly, but the other part of the plant which is not directly in contact with the support will undergo rigorous cell division, cell differentiation and cell elongation. And because of these three activities that are happening to these part of the plant, what is going to happen? The plant would grow fast. And since the plant is growing at a higher speed here to the parts which are not touched, to the parts here which are touched, actually what is going to happen? The plant will eventually start coiling, because here the growth would become extensive. So what will happen? The coiling will happen. So now you can relate. In climbers, if you see, if you would have seen those coiled areas mainly, the coiled areas might not directly be in the contact, but why such growth has happened over there? Because of the extensive cell division, differentiation and elongation activities that has happened to these parts. So this triggered growth that has occurred because of a touch over here that's happening through a support is something which we are saying as the thigmotropic activity. What is chemotropism? Lastly, just to see, so this is the activity we see in the case of fertilization in plant. So what is going to happen? We do know that the pollen tubes, the pollen grains land on the stigma, and since they have to reach to the egg apparatus, the pollen grains, is going to develop a tube which will transport this pollen grain entirely inside the egg apparatus. Now, how does this happen? Have you ever thought of? How is the plant growing like this? So it is because of the sugars which are present on these surfaces. The pollen grains will respond to these sugar, which is a chemical over here, and because of showing response, it will show the growth of the pollen tube which is occurring over here. Otherwise, since if the pollen grains would not develop the pollen tube, the pollen grains can't reach here because the stigma is here, the ovary is here. They are entirely distant apart. So the chemical is triggering the growth of a pollen tube to happen, and because of that growth, the pollens are able to reach inside. So since here the growth is occurring because of a chemical, we say this type of tropic movement as chemotropism. So I hope you guys are clear with all these different types of tropic movement, the positive, negatives also that we have discussed, and the two simple descriptions also that we have discussed. Sunlight, which is phototropism; water, which is hydrotropism; gravity, which is geotropism; touch, which is thigmotropism; and chemical, which is the chemotropism. So let us now quickly cover the last part of our video, which are the nastic movements. So this, as you can see, is the last part of the video that we have to talk, and here we are talking about the nastic movement in the plant. So as we have understood what is a nastic movement, there are two important properties. First of all, it is a growth independent movement, and secondly, these are directional movement. Means, first of all, there is no growth which is going to happen. Yes, but plant will show a movement, but there would be no growth first of all which will happen, and wherever the direction of the stimulus will be, the response can either be even away from the direction. Means if you have given a touch, for example, the thigmonastic movement, so if you would have touched to this part of the plant can show you response to this part. It might not show the response here, but it can show you response to other part. That is how you define a nastic movement as. So a growth independent movement where the direction of response is not determined by the direction of stimulus. So that's the same thing that we saw, that the stimulus can be to this part, but the direction of response can come to this part also, or maybe to other parts also. It's not regulated. That's the meaning of nastic movement. So in nastic movement, it's very easy. We have to understand two types only. Like in tropic movement, we have understood 5 different types. In nastic movement, we have to understand only 2 types of nastic movement. So in this one, it is thigmonastic, and this is very important, children, and I have explained you very easily through a flow chart. So thigmonastic movement, as we know, it is a nastic movement, means growth independent movement, but it is in regards to again the touch. So the stimulus remains the same. The stimulus over here is the touch. And in which case we see that plant is responding because of a touch that has happened. So you would have seen the touch me not plant. It is also known as Mimosa pudica. Again, a 1 mark important question. Tell the scientific name of touch me not plant. So you should be very well aware regarding this scientific name also.
So I hope many of you would have touched this touch me not plant. What happened? When we touch the touch me not plant mainly, what happens is the leaves close. That's what we know, right? The leaves starts closing. Once we are not touching, the leaves are open, but when we touch them, the leaves get closed, and that's why we name them as touch me not plant mainly. But it's not that simple. There is a logic behind that's happening in the plant body because you have touched the plant externally. What is happening? When you touch to any part of the plant, it triggers a electrochemical signal. Now imagine, in plant's body, a electrochemical signal is happening because of the touch that you have made. And because of these electrochemical signal, what is happening? The process of exoosmosis happened to the leaves. Now let me tell you first of all, the leaves of these touch me not plants have a swollen padded base here. The base area is swollen and it is padded. And it is turgid also. Why it is turgid? Because normally these leaves have, the water is filled in these leaves, and because water is there, the leaves are turgid in nature. Now because you have touched them, because an electrochemical signal has been initiated, what is going to happen because of this? At the same surface of the leaf, exoosmosis will happen. And we know what is exoosmosis. Exoosmosis means the water what was there, which was keeping the leaf turgid, has now went out. And that's what mean by exoosmosis. The water removal is happening from the part of the leaf. Because of that, what is going to happen? After you touch, what you notice, the leaves come down, they bend down, right? Or they become flaccid. But they become flaccid because exoosmosis in them have happened. But we do know that again after some time the leaves are going to take back their normal shape. The leaves are going to become turgid again. Why? Because endoosmosis again happen, which will allow the entry of water into these leaves, and the leaves would again become turgid in nature. So this is just to demonstrate you about the touch me not plant that I have drawn. These are the open leaf that you can see, and these are the flaccid leaves or the drooped leaf. So if I would have touched this part of the plant, the senses would have gone to that part also. That's why we say direction of response is not regulated by the direction of stimulus. And since because I have touched, electrochemical signal has generated, exoosmosis has happened, the water has gone out, and the leaves have become flaccid in nature. They have went down. But as endoosmosis would happen, again the water entry would happen and the leaves will again become turgid. So this is a simple flowchart explaining us about the THIGMOTROPISM movement. Just the last part we have to study, which is a PHOTONASTIC movement. So let's quickly check that out, the last part of the video.
So this is the last part, as I said you, about the photonastic movement that we have to see. So this is a nastic movement of a plant which we get to see because of a light. And here the example is a moonflower, which again is a very common plant mainly. So it's seen by the moonflower of the plant, the petals of the flower mainly. And the scientific name of the plant, as I said you do need to know, is Mirabilis jalapa. Again, a very important possible question. So do be aware about the scientific name as well. So what is the case we see here? Normally that we see in the plant, what happens that when there is sunlight, the petals of the flowers generally we see they open up, and then there are various plant processes that happen. But here it's exactly opposite that happen. The petals of the plant close during the day and they open during the night. So again, the light is not triggering the response which normally happens in plants that we get to see. So that was all about the movement and coordination in plant that we needed to know. The tropic movement we studied all in detail, and the nastic movement. And as I have said you, the activities which I have shown you, I am going to make a separate video on all those activities. So do check out that video because it's very important for you to know, because in exam you can definitely be asked a question to design an activity to show either photo, geo or hydrotropism. So that was all for today. I hope you guys are clear with the video. If you have any doubts, ask to me in the comment section box. I'll be happy to help you out. And as I always say, until then, happy learning guys. Take care.